Welcome to Bearing Weight, a space for the stories elephants can't tell, shared by the people who know them best. Hosted by the Weeping Elephant Project. Welcome back to Bearing Weight. Today, we're joined by Frank Pope. Frank is the CEO of Save the Elephants, an organization founded by the late Ian Douglas Hamilton, who was one of the most important figures in elephant conservation, and Frank's father-in-law. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to carry forward that legacy, how AI is being used in conservation right now, and how Frank sees the future of elephant protection taking shape. So without further ado, let's jump right in. We like to open by asking everyone if you can share your elephant origin story. So how you first became involved with elephants, what made you decide to dedicate your career to them.
Well, I did a degree in zoology, but yeah, my first love was very much the ocean. I just thought that was the wild frontier. It was just, and it still is kind of a place of just enormous mystery to me, and the fact, all the unseen depths and
Yeah,
how impenetrable it is to us as a species. I continue to find fascinating. But I had not been exposed to the wilds of Africa until I met my wife, who she being Ian Douglas Hamilton's daughter, when she took me to Kenya, the first thing she did was we jumped in her beaten up old Land Rover and drove up to meet the elephants of Samburu, and that was quite a moment, because looking in the eye of an elephant, especially in Samburu, which really is, and I've heard this, I'm not just biased on this, but I've heard it from many different sources, that it's an unbelievably good place, if not the best place in Africa, to meet elephants as individuals and peer into their society, because they're so tame and trusting that you're right in amongst the herd, so you're right up against that eye. So it feels very much like looking into a whale's eye. You have that same kind of transporting feeling of here's a consciousness, but it's a different consciousness. It's a contemplative feeling you get from those elephants as you would from a whale. So yeah, that was that was when the door cracked open, but it wasn't for another 8 years or so. I was still working in Ocean World even after moving to Kenya, and then the ivory crisis was really in full swing, and Ian needed help, and he'd lost a key staff member. So I said, look, I'll jump in and do what I can for a year, and that's now, well, plus years later.
Did you actually look at a whale in the eye?
Yeah, I mean, as much as you can.
You got to lay that on us. You got to tell us about that.
I mean, I've looked at whales. The time that I've had just a whale sliding past in a Zodiac in the Sea of Cortez, and just the eye appearing for a moment. The times I've had more close interactions with seals, I think, were the ones I've actually frolicked with more. But yeah, whales and actually captive whales also, orca and so on.
Yeah,
that's also transporting. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you'd ever go back to working in marine conservation and leave the elephants behind?
I've thought about. When I started with Save the Elephants, I thought, blimey, what a cool outfit.
Yeah.
It's this mix of really amazing local naturalists who are superbly trained, and then perfused with the best international tech companies from around the world and research institutions, and this sort of magical mixing. It was kind of like an ocean front where you've got an upwelling from the deep meeting, it was just this life and this energy that came from this mixing. So I thought, God, if I could find something like that in Ocean World, then I'd be happy. But
yeah.
I don't know. I guess I feel like as long as I keep learning, it feels like every year I'm learning more and more. Until that starts to flatten out, I'm quite keen to keep going with elephants.
How many years has it been with elephants?
I've done, well, I started in 2012, so yeah, 14 years.
Frank, how did you get to be in the position you're in now? What was the progression to get you there?
More luck and yeah. Roll
Tell us about how lucky you were.
What
was your role when you started out? at Save the
Well,
Elephant?
I mean, my life goes all the way back to being born to a very cool father who was an academic and parents who loved exploration and being born in a wealthy country, lots of opportunities, and kind of the freedom to go and uh, do work that I thought was important.
Yeah.
So starting there and being able to pursue a passion for the wild, and then to be able to advocate for the wild through writing. And Ian was my father-in-law, and the founder of Save the Elephants was amazingly generous and encouraging when I came to Save the Elephants. And I was like, I thought, okay, I can help. I'd run lots of projects before at sea, and I thought I can help you be the oil in the engine of Save the Elephants, and I can help you get things done. He was like, no, no, you can be more than that. Don't think that just because you don't have a PhD in elephants that you can't be powerful for elephants. And I thought, yeah, you're just saying that. But now that I'm in the position that I'm in, I realize that yeah, we have a deep need for people with PhDs in elephant behavior, but we have a lot of need for other people with other skills too. We need accountants, we need publicists, we need lawyers,
Yeah.
we need drivers and pilots and all the different people that go into making conservation successful. There's a huge range of skills, and you
Yeah.
employ exclusively scientists at your peril. And so, yeah, I think I was lucky in having Ian be so encouraging. And I think being a writer was and especially being a science and environment journalist, like my passion is and has been for a long time talking to scientists. I love spending time with scientists and telling their story. And that's basically what I do at Save the Elephants. I get to spend all my time with wonderful people with wonderful brains. Help, they sometimes butt heads with each other because we've got lots of different characters amongst our science team, and that's because I don't have, I get to play referee, and it's wonderful, and I get to tell their story to the people that can support the work, and then have a hand in making sure that the work gets done. So, I mean, it's the best job in the world.
I think your point of not needing a PhD to make an impact is a really great one, though. And I think that that's an important thing for people who are younger and whether they're in school or not really sure what they want to do yet, but know that they want to work with animals is a really impactful thing to hear because I think a lot of high school, college age kids are like, I need to get a PhD or I need to be a vet or I need to have a certain background to help animals. And that's just not true because so many different skill sets can contribute to the work that everyone is doing within conservation and animal welfare as a whole. And it's important that people realize that there's no one set path.
Yeah. I Save the Elephants is part of this wonderful group called the Wildlife Conservation Network, based out of San Francisco. They've got something, I'm going to get it wrong, but around 20 different partners from conservation organizations from around the world and many other affiliates. And yes, there are biologists in there, but the one thing that all of these people these are world changing people that are leading their community, their country, whatever level they're operating on, they are they're leading these places to a better future. And they're doing that, and the one thing that runs through all of them is passion. They're just passionate, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how they're channeling that passion. They're saying, "Okay, I love this salamander or this pangolin or this forest elephant or whatever it is, and I'm gonna fight for this creature's right to exist in this world." And they just do it. And I think for young people, that is the most important thing, is that the world is not stationary. We don't have to lie down and let the world happen. We can change the world. We can change the future, but you only change it by doing stuff. And it always starts at a very low level. And all of these people's stories start extremely locally. And you kind of have to maintain those super local roots, but you can then expand to having a massive impact. So
Yeah.
It,
world is their oyster.
this work is too difficult for people to do who aren't passionate about it. It's not the kind of thing you can phone in. I mean, if you don't have that thing, whatever that thing is, that drives people to want to save, want to change, want to do something different, you couldn't do it without having that real passion for it. There's lots of other things you can do without passion, but
Yeah.
in my view, the animal work is just it's too difficult. It's too traumatic. It's too gut wrenching to do unless you really feel it. This is what you want to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the research you guys are doing right now, just for anyone who might not be as familiar.
Yeah, so Save the Elephants has always been about research. The founder of the organization, Ian Douglas Hamilton, he started as a researcher, and he was the first to start looking at the behavior of elephants in the wild. Up until then, the way you studied elephants was to shoot them, shoot a whole herd, and then dissect them, and we learned an enormous amount that way. But my God, we missed a lot too, including the fact that elephants are led by females. It had always been assumed that elephants were led by the big bulls, but the elephant society doesn't work that way. And so we've got that's the core, that's the heart of our organization is the research stuff. So we do everything from the ecology, we do the behavior. I'll give you some sort of highlights that come to mind from the kind of very practical things like, say, how do we count elephants? At the moment, we still count governments across savanna areas of Africa. We still count elephants sitting in the back of Cessnas, flying at 350 foot over the savannah with airsick, tired human observers sitting against the window, trying to sort of count how many come past them in a strip, or even in some areas, try and count every single one that we see. And we 5 years ago did no, more than that. 7 years ago now, we did a trial where we participated in one of these government surveys, and then we went up behind immediately following the survey with cameras, and we sampled the whole area with cameras, and we discovered that human observers, because they're airsick and tired sitting in the back, they're not very good at counting even elephants. We were missing 30% of
Wow.
elephants, and as you went down through, we were missing more than half of the giraffe and the zebra in these systems.
Wow.
And you basically it took us 9 months with
Whoa.
9 people counting images, because this was pre-AI, right?
Right.
And then you could get it. You still, there are some unknown unknowns in there, so some true negative, false negatives where there are animals in the picture, but you just haven't been able to see them. But
Yeah.
what we know of is a minimum 30% missed, because we could actually
Wow.
see 30% more
Yeah.
pictures than the humans had seen. And as
Yeah.
I said, as you go down through the species, you miss more and more of them. And weird artifacts, like if a human sees a mixed herd of zebra and giraffe, the first animal you see determines the only species you'll see. So if the first thing you see is a giraffe, then you only count the giraffe. All of the zebra are invisible to you. Similarly, the other way around, if you see a zebra, you'll count just the zebra, and you can see it clear as day in the data. So it's pretty
Wow.
fascinating.
Wow.
And so that was fascinating at the time. It proved a point to us, but it was not something we could operationalize, because you can't spend 9 months with 9 people counting photos.
Yeah.
But now with AI being able to pick out the at least it can't identify the species very well, but it can tell you what's interesting in the images, which, given that only 2% of our images had any kind of animal life in it at all that we could see, that's
Wow.
that cuts out a lot of wasted time. So that's a kind of practical end of the research, all the way through to studying. We discovered and published a paper about a year and a half ago, showing for the first time in the animal kingdom an animal giving others of its species abstract names for one another.
I did
So
see.
elephants,
How
not the names.
did
So it had been a suspicion, right? You spend with the herds, and you hear one elephant rumble, and a single individual turns around or responds in some way. So you think, is that a name? But then how do you go about proving that? So we had this wonderful partnership with Cornell, another one of those who do a lot of acoustic work. A researcher called Mickey Pardo came out and did a postdoc with us, and he spent 2 years in the field with a very sensitive microphone that could go down all the way into the infrasonic range, listening for when elephants were making calls. And he managed to record, I think it was about 300 or so calls that were responded to. And he
Wow.
recorded
So
those things
cool.
and recorded who made the call and who responded. Okay, so that's phase one. Then you go back and you randomize all those file names, but remember which family they were from. So then he went back in the field with this enormous loudspeaker, the like of which you need to reproduce the full spectrum of an elephant's call because they go through 8 octaves. And you will take this thing out and okay, I'm with the artist's family, and so here are all my calls from the artists, and you play the call and you don't know who it's from and who was supposed to respond, but then you record who responded. And sure enough, it was the individuals that responded first time round responded the second time round. And then again, AI came in to help. When we looked at the spectrograms, you could see that there was a similarity in the way that David would say the name Frank and the way that Danielle would say Frank. And you could see that the AI could tell you, yes, there's a similarity here. Infuriatingly, being AI, it couldn't be more specific. It's kind of a little bit of a black
Yeah.
box. So yes, these two are similar. It's on the lower end of what's possible to do with AI because 300 calls is not enough really to do proper AI analysis. So the next phase of that now is trying to get lots more acoustic data on what just elephant conversations and try and get enough context that we can figure out or get a hint as to what they're saying.
I did read an article about this, and it's just when you take it in, it's truly hard to believe. But
Yeah, it's amazing.
you describe how it was done, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, somebody had to spend 2 years doing this and the additional time you all spent, but that's quite the find. Like I'm
Yeah.
saying something novel, but that is quite the find.
Have you guys thought about doing a like comparative study, doing a very similar research model, but with Asian elephants and also with captive elephants to see if Asian elephants also, do the same naming, which I would expect that they do. It would be so interesting to take recordings in different captive environments and see how that changed based on the captive environment, with these like falsified herds or with elephants that have not been together for very long. Since those are such artificial environments, it would be so interesting to kind of compare the way that they're communicating with each other.
Yeah. So and we've got some zoo partners who do research on the animals they have in their zoos. And we have partners that work in Asia, but we're not directly involved in either. Um,
Yeah,
but that's the beauty of science, right? You show one thing in one place, and then others can try and replicate it and go, yeah, that holds true over here. And they're like, hey, no,
right.
it doesn't happen here. And that's the beauty of it. About 2 months after that naming paper came out, someone else published a similar finding in marmosets, interestingly. And
Huh.
I would imagine this is we're gonna start seeing more and more species
Yeah.
be shown to give one another names, because why wouldn't they? It's such a useful
Why
thing to
wouldn't
do.
they? Yeah.
It's as the Economist had a brilliant line. I'm gonna mangle it, but it was something like the opening line for the story on this was that another brick out of the monument of human exceptionalism or exceptionalism falls. Because we've
Yeah.
built up this feeling of ourselves being
Yes.
these incredible exceptional creatures that do all these things.
Yes.
Flies are doing it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I was
We
just
just
about to
don't know.
say what another example of humans being so incredibly self-centered that we would think that we are the only ones unique enough to give each other names.
Exactly. Exactly. The crazy thing is that we're all so excited by peeking into the auditory world of elephants.
Yeah.
We're nowhere in studying the most important communication channel for elephants, which is olfaction. We have no handle on that. We've got no way of studying it. It's so hard
Yeah.
to study.
Yeah.
And yet we know it's the most important thing. That's how elephants perceive the world, number one.
Yeah.
More of their brain is devoted to olfaction than anything else. So again, is AI going to be able to help us get a grip on that? Are we going to be able to come
Right.
up with panels of different esters that will help us experiment and see how it works for elephants? How do elephants see the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just the start. And this is the thing about artificial intelligence. We're all worried about the loss of human faculty and the fact that we may well end up being trodden down by the robots, and all these are valid fears, right? But there are also these enormous upsides that this is a tool that's going to help us step out of our perception of the world, and it's going to extend our senses into this world and crack open secrets that have been invisible to us, and that's really exciting.
Yeah. I've been seeing so much conversation online in the past week or so about AI, and it seems like a lot of people within conservation are pretty torn on the use of AI. And I've seen a lot of people on more of the um like advocacy storytelling side being torn because so many people are using AI to develop fake images of elephants and fake stories about, groups doing some kind of initiative in Africa to save an elephant and creating fake images, creating fake stories. Do you think that there is a downside to using AI, or do you think that that kind of is outweighed by the benefits of being able to use it for the data analysis and things like that?
It's funny you bring it up because I have a victim very close to home. My
Yeah?
93-year-old mother lives with us, and I discovered the other day, to my horror, that she's addicted to AI generated stories about heroic vets saving African
Hmm.
wildlife.
Yep.
And one of my daughters had pointed it out to me and said, "Granny, you're watching artificial intelligence." She was furious with her. I said, "No, I'm not."
Yeah.
And I'm torn, because she loves the stories, and they're not true. How does it hurt us? Does it dilute the the power of real stories? Perhaps. Does it make real stories more valuable? Perhaps.
Yeah.
I think we respond to real stories, and we kind of I think we're pretty young in in our relationship with this technology, and I see it even in my own kids. They're pretty they're pretty wily. They know
Yeah.
what's real and what's not, and they've got ways of filtering it out, and that's
But
natural that we do that.
older people, not that I'm an older person, but older people look at this stuff and you have no idea whether it's real or not. I mean, there's some stuff I've looked at and I'm shocked, and then I think, "Wait a minute,
Yeah.
that can't be what's actually happening." And it's
Yeah.
it's very, very frustrating, and I'm sure kids who grow up on it, they have a different way of looking at this stuff, but it is the things that you can do. It's really very, very difficult to know what's real and what's not.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that all the concerns about, how much energy it uses,
Mhm.
how much it erodes our capacity to do things. I love writing, and I've worked as a writer, and I started playing with it and getting it to do some of my writing for me. Pretty soon I was playing Scrabble and couldn't think of more than a four-letter word. It's like,
Yeah.
what's okay, right, I've got to I can't do that. And actually there are other ways
Yeah.
to use it that are better. And I think we've all just gotta learn to use it in ways that are helpful to us, and learn not to use it in ways that make us less.
Yeah, and I think like you said, because it is such early days of using AI, you get excited and you can use AI to do all these tasks. And even when you're looking online at different images and stories, I imagine for people who are donating to conservation projects, it's probably pretty challenging because they are trying to filter out, is this a real project? Is this a real elephant that needs help? I see all these AI generated images of elephants in need and people running fundraisers for it. And some of those people probably have malicious intent there. And some people might see an image online and think, oh my gosh, I need to help this elephant. And so I think that that is a real downfall for donors more than anything else. People are probably getting taken advantage of within the conservation field, and then funds aren't going where they should be going.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think we're all gonna have to grow up, and we're gonna have to develop tools, and just like
Yeah.
trusted news sources, there'll be trusted places
Mhm.
you go to give support for elephants, and you just gotta the challenge is that we're all highly emotional creatures. We get stirred by that one story, and that's what makes you want to act. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily make a donation to help elephants because you wake up one morning and go, I think I'm gonna do some good today, and I'm gonna go and find a reputable elephant organization. That's not how it works. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. It's a challenge.
But I mean, for the work that you guys are doing, it's so incredibly powerful and time-saving to have those kinds of resources. And even with things like coding and, developing new tools for people to use, it is so helpful and time-saving, which I think in a lot of cases, and probably in your guys's, outweighs the other side of things, because you're able to sort through data and publish projects and kind of ideate on things so much more efficiently. And I think that is a really powerful upside.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I guess yeah. The downside is that one of the more important things we can do in conservation in Kenya or Africa is to employ people, right?
Mhm.
The more people we can engage and get working on this stuff, the better. And if someone's job was to look through images of wildlife, that was a job, and it was in
Yeah.
conservation, working for elephants, and not very expensive for the donor, but life changing for the employee. And now those jobs have gone, and
Yeah.
instead that energy is being used by a data center somewhere, and a little bit of money is trickling into Sam Altman's pocket.
Yeah.
So so it's a challenge. We got to watch out for that. But I don't think anyone knows where this path is going to lead. I have to hope that it's yes, there are changes, but I think we can navigate them.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
skeptical. No, I am truly skeptical,
Yeah.
but we'll see. I won't
The
be
thing
around to
is,
see some of it,
what are
but
we going to do? What can you do? Right? We can't even if we say I'm an unbeliever in AI. I boycott it. No one else is
you
Right.
boycotting.
can't.
You can't. So
You can't.
if you're not on
Yeah.
the if you're not on the bus, you don't have a hand on the steering wheel, or you can't
Yeah.
influence.
Yes, Frank. One of my interests in this, in the people who do this work, is dealing with the difficulty. I used the word trauma before. That anybody who's doing this work and hears the stories and sees what's happening in certain contexts, it's got to be devastating in certain ways. And you've experienced that. I have no doubt. And the question really is, how do you what do you do with that? How do you tolerate that, and what do you do with it when you're, at home and thinking about this stuff and it's just eating you up? How do you deal with it?
It is you've got to be an optimist, right? You've got to be able to imagine that there is a better world out there and that things don't have to keep on going wrong. But yeah, it's very hard. And when it hits hardest is when it's individuals that you've known and loved.
Hmm. Hmm.
The thing that, as you were talking, the thing that immediately comes to mind is that we lost a great friend in a bull called Sarara, and we brought up our kids in this in Samburu National Reserve in this beautiful eco camp that my wife was running. Yeah, we had 6 glorious years, and one of our greatest friends was this bull called Sarara. He used to sleep outside our tent. Giant bull
Hmm.
elephant, magnificent guy, and I recognize his bottom anywhere. Our
Hmm.
field team is fantastic, but they normally recognize elephants by their ears. I remember driving through the bush one day and came across this elephant whose head was stuck in a bush, but I could see his bum. The same bum that I slept next to most nights. I could recognize the
Right.
fold in his bottom, and I was like, "Look, it's Sarara." And David was like, "What do you mean? How do you know it's Sarara?" And sure enough, he pulled his head, and it was Sarara. I was like, "I recognize that bottom anywhere."
That's so funny.
But, yeah, so we put a great deal of effort into trying to keep elephants safe, not just in Samburu, but through our work now across the entire continent in the center of a collaborative network of other organizations, and,
Hmm.
this is what we live and breathe for. And one day after the rains, Sarara followed some females into a bit of swampland to the south of Buffalo Springs Reserve, not even 10 miles from our camp, and was shot by some people who were angry at elephants coming too close to a town that they'd only just arrived in, relatively speaking. The females didn't know any better. Sarara certainly didn't know any better. It was devastating on so many fronts, and you just think, God, if we can't save that one elephant who is our
Hmm.
nearest,
Yeah.
what hope have we got?
Hmm.
What are we even doing here? We should just pack up.
How do you
Uh,
think about the anger that comes with that, with the people who would shoot an elephant? whether it is a, visiting trophy hunter or someone within the local community who says this elephant was on my land and they were getting too close. How do you deal with the anger that comes with that?
For better or for worse, I'm on the empathetic scale of things. Yeah, I know. Just in that one situation, I know that area well that he'd gone into, and yes, I felt enormous anger and despair at what had happened. But I'm also aware of, we don't have trophy hunting in Kenya, and that's a very different thing. I think that's abhorrent, um,
Yeah.
and that yeah, I do not understand that. I do understand the fear and the desperation of people that live alongside, that have nothing, that live alongside parks or in amongst elephants, and they have lost touch with the traditions that once kept them safe.
Yeah.
They don't know elephants, they don't know how to behave, and suddenly there's this thing, and it's ripping up all the crops that are gonna feed their family, or it's squashed their grandmother as she went to collect water, or disemboweled their daughter as she walked to school,
Yeah.
because they didn't know how to keep themselves safe. And yeah, it's not a simple story, this coexistence, and that's why we're putting a lot of effort into helping people with the tools that they need, and the understanding, and it's an enormous problem across the whole of the elephant range across Africa. This is the number one problem, is
Yeah.
how do we empower people, to educate people and share our understanding of how to live with elephants so that they don't get in these situations where elephants are threatening their way of life and so exposing themselves to revenge.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's a hard problem because if it was easy, it wouldn't have happened on our doorstep.
Yeah, absolutely. But the empathy towards the human side of human elephant conflict, I think, is a very important thing to be sharing, especially with people who do not live in elephant range countries and who, I'm sitting in my apartment in Seattle. There are no elephants coming in here to destroy my home. And I think we oftentimes villainize the local communities without understanding their perspective and understanding that when you're sharing resources with such a large and dangerous animal, you make decisions, and we can't judge that without knowing the full picture and the full
Yeah.
scope of what those people have been through and the trauma that they have associated with elephants.
Yeah, and in the end, these are the most important people to
Yeah.
win over when it comes to the future of elephants in Africa. Like
Yeah.
if we can't persuade the people of rural Africa that elephants are worth having around for whatever reason, hopefully not just monetary worth, but for all of the different reasons that you and I love elephants, that exists. But economics plays a part for people too, and so you've got to find a way to share the benefits of elephants, and to reduce the downsides of elephants. And if we fail at that, elephants won't survive.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the enormous challenge we face. When you ask me what keeps me optimistic, one of the things that keeps me optimistic at a global level is that people are reaching their peak. Humanity's peak population, peak human population. The UN used to say that it was coming in 2100. Recent estimates with better modeling are now projecting 2085. I've seen some projections as soon as 2065. That is when we're going to reach peak human population. And at that point, the human footprint, it may start shrinking. And we're going to be losing in conservation until that point. That's just a given.
Yeah.
We're not going to win globally until that moment. And that's our job, is to fight a good retreat, and a managed retreat that's strategic until that point. Africa is a slightly different picture, because the continent of Africa has got the fastest growing human population on the planet, and it will still be growing in 2100. Kenya, we're currently at about 55 million people. 1963, I think we're at 5 or 6 million people.
Hmm.
2100, no, 2050, 100 million people is what's projected to be. Massive pressure on
Yeah.
landscapes. And so, we've got our work cut out if we're going to find an accommodation between people and elephants, such that they can survive this expansion of humanity. Every continent on the planet except for Antarctica used to have elephants, and they all disappeared pretty much on cue with the arrival of humans,
Yeah.
which also coincided with some climate shifts. But you know, I think humans are a prime suspect for what drove elephants extinct. Now, our job is to make sure that that doesn't happen in Africa.
Well, I'm glad you're doing it, I'll tell you that. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is really what you're doing is
Oh, it's a privilege, and I think we can do it. This is the thing: is that we're not where we were 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago. You know, we have the tools of modern science, and we have the tools of modern tools of empathy. And social media has got a lot of downsides, but it does connect as
Yeah.
well, and it can be a force for mobilization as well. And I think what we're seeing in Kenya is that currently the government has a great appetite to keep landscapes connected, and is prepared to invest in that. And I think that there's a real path to getting a modern and developed Kenya that has not hollowed out its environmental foundations in the way that other countries have, and other continents have. We could end up with Kenya as a leader in Africa if we can get it right in Kenya. We can see an opportunity for other countries in Africa to follow Kenya's example and show that we can have a developed economy, but we can have our ecosystems intact, and that would be a global win.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not a small undertaking. It's not a small project, that's for
Yeah,
sure. It's gonna take many, many lifetimes.
yeah. Well, at least until we humans stop expanding, for sure.
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah, but like you said, we've come a long way. We're not where we once were, and that is enough to give you hope that things will continue to progress in the right direction. Even if that progression is not linear, there's going to be ups and downs, but we're moving
And
in the right
hopefully
direction.
there's some young ears listening to your podcast one day who thinks, I could get involved in helping save my little patch of wilderness or my
Yeah.
little lawn and make a corridor for a hedgehog, you
Yeah.
know? It starts.
I'm ready to apply for a job with you.
Me
Yay!
So
too.
hopefully younger people have this it has the
Have the
same
same feeling.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So I have a few kind of rapid fire questions
Sure.
that, can answer in a sentence or two. The first is, if an elephant could speak directly to the world in our human language, what do you think they'd say? Besides the fact that they would absolutely know your name, what else would they say?
They would. Well, it's so hard, it's a bit like saying if you met humans, what would a human say?
Yeah.
Elephants are they're a multitude of souls, and there are so many different characters within them, and traditions, and perspectives and approaches, and it makes them difficult to work with, right? Because they don't all do the same thing. They all do different
Yeah, they
things.
have such different personalities.
Um, we had another great elephant friend of ours is called Anwar, and we've known him since he was a little boy, and he's always loved cars. So I think what Anwar would say is, can I have a go?
Can I have one of those?
He's broken 3 windscreens of ours so far, not because he's aggressive, but he loves too much, and he hugs the car and just gives it a gentle squeeze, and the whole car goes when he
That's too
squeezes that.
funny. He's probably like, "Damn it, I broke another one."
Yeah.
In your time working with elephants, what have you learned from them that you otherwise may not have been exposed to that has changed the way that you think about freedom, empathy, or even humanity?
We share so much of our DNA with such a wide variety of creatures on this planet. We are close cousins of slugs. There's so little that separates us. And all of the creatures, if you look outside your window and you see a bird or you see an ant walking across the windowsill, you and that ant, we've survived 4.3 billion years of extinctions and life, and we are both survivors. Both of us have ancestors going back that long. You and the slug and the ant. We've all our lineage stretches back just as far as one another, and we're closely related. And elephants, I think, are a wonderful example of that in that we identify with them so strongly. You see the calves playing, and you see a mother and how a mother treats her calf with affection and sometimes, annoyance, and it's just so identifiable.
Yeah.
And yet they're so different from us. They're about as different from us as it's possible to be while still being a mammal. And I think what they do for me is they just remind me of how close we all are and how much respect we should all have for one another, not just the elephants that we identify so strongly with because we share all of these
Right.
things that we share about family life, lifespan and leadership and so on. And it's easy for us to identify with an elephant. It's not so easy for us to identify with the slug, but we should because they're our cousins too.
Yeah. I love that. As we wrap up, we want everyone listening to feel empowered as they're listening to this conversation. So with that in mind, what's something that anyone can do to help elephants? Whether they, regardless of what field they work in, how old they are.
Well, the first thing I'd say is that supporting Save the Elephants goes a long way. We're an engine that sits inside a continental network that stretches across Africa of all sorts of different organizations that are like individuals are repurposing. We get to invest in them in order to turn their focus onto elephants for a particular project. And more than 120 of these different organizations from we had a little 3-person team in Somalia the other day, discover the first elephants in Somalia to be recorded in the country for 20 years with a tiny little grant, but that gets another range state back up and running, all the way through to big organizations that are holding off Al-Shabaab and Al Jazeera and Islamic militants in trouble-stricken countries of West Africa. A little bit of money goes a very long way in this kind of model, which is a new model for conservation. This is not about supporting a big head office in Washington, D.C. This is about money going straight out into the field and making a difference for elephants. So every little counts in that respect. So all of the details for that are on our website at savetheelephants.org. I wish we were having this conversation in a couple of weeks because we're about to launch an ambassador network, and we want to try and mobilize the youth and give people the tools with which they can make a difference and give talks at their local their school or hold little lemonade stand fundraisers and just get the word out as well as raising money, because people need to understand the difference that they can make for the future of our planet by investing in the biodiversity that remains. And that spirit, I think, wonderful if it comes all the way through to Africa, but let's do it on our doorsteps too. We need every bit of biodiversity that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. What a cool program to launch. I'm excited to see more about that.
It's going to be fun. Well, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome anytime to come back and talk with us some more.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, guys, for the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you, Frank. This has been, we would love to have you back. I speak for Danielle, and thank you for what you do. And it's extraordinary work. And it's a privilege to talk to you, for real.
Such fun talking to you guys. Thank you for your interest in all things elephant and for everything you guys are doing with Weeping Elephant. Yeah, we'll see you again soon, I hope.
If you want to learn more about the incredible work Save the Elephants is doing, visit savetheelephants.org. You can also follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Save the Elephants. And if this conversation moved you, consider making a donation directly through their website. Every bit helps secure a future for elephants in the wild. As always, thank you for listening to Bearing Weight. You can follow along with us at Weeping Elephant Project, and we'll see you next time.